welcome everybody. We're going to talk about the counter management system in Jackalope today. And when I say counter management, I'm talking about the physical machines that you use to take traffic counts. So the things that actually are out there on the side of the roadway with tubes attached to them or loops attached to them or whatever, and the little beasties that are actually responsible for collecting your data. And the counter management has a couple of purposes. One is just to have a system in which all of your counters are maintained in terms of their status and whether they're working, what software version are they on, and things like that. So just having a system to keep all that information. And probably the most important aspect of it is the ability to correlate the quality of data that you're getting from counters to the counter that took it. So in other words, if you have a counter that's got some sort of malfunction in it, you may not notice it with a single count, but you may notice it, if 10 counts in a row all have low volumes. That might be something you're interested in knowing. And so the counter management system is a new system in Jackalope. It's partially introduced in the 1.03 versions. So if you are on a production version or a dev version, if you're on a dev version, you have the latest and greatest. But if you're on a production version, you will have most of what I'm going to talk about today. We'll probably, for those people currently on a production branch, so like 1.030, 6.jwi if you guys know what I'm talking about, we'll probably not graft any of the new device stuff to your production branch unless you ask us to, so in which case you would have to wait for the 1.04 something release to get everything that we're talking about here. So let's log in. I'm just logging into one of our development environments, Kansas specifically, because currently Kansas is the only place that has any of the stuff filled out that I'm going to show you today. The menu item that we'll start with is this counter inventory menu item. And let me also just say, this is kind of the bare bones counter management system. One of the goals of this meeting is to get some feedback about how you in particular might like to see this used in your organization. If there's features that might just really make this a great thing for your organization, please let us know. So you should have in the 103s a counter inventory menu item. And within that counter inventory, you'll have just one button, the counter management. And think of these counters, I'm going to be using counters and devices interchangeably. They both mean the same thing. They both mean that physical thing out there on the roadway. They operate very similarly to traffic sites. And so a lot of what I'm going to show you right now is the exact same thing that you see in traffic sites if you do your traffic site management. So when we do counter management, we get a list that looks just like the traffic site list, right? Probably far fewer. There's 1,500 devices here in Kansas. You can, of course, export and do all the normal stuff that you can do in all of the grids and filter and all of that other fun stuff. Also, and this is only true in this interface and in the traffic site interface, you can look at site splits in this interface. So if you click on Show Site Splits, if a device has been changed over time, and so just like with sites, if you change an attribute of a site, or excuse me, of a device, but you want that attribute to be the old attribute for all prior data, you can do that. And essentially what happens is you create a device split instead of a site split, and then that behaves just like the traffic site splits. And so you can see them all by doing here. I usually don't do that because I just want to see just the sites. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new device. This looks exactly like the Create New Site screen, right? So you have the date the counter was established, and so I'm just going to say that 2017, so we have a little bit of leeway behind us. So let's say that you bought the counter on November 28th, 2017. The expiration date is when this counter was taken out of service. So if it's still in service, let's just leave it at the 4000 end of time date that's used everywhere in Jackalope. And this description is the same as the site description, where we have the timeline across the top. I'm just going to leave it as initial device creation, which means this is just the very first incarnation of this device. If you do a device split, you would change the description appropriately for the new split. All right, I'm just going to hit OK. And lo and behold, we have a screen that looks very similar to the traffic site screen. We have the timeline across the top. One difference between a device and a site is currently there's no support for notes. You know, and if we go to the traffic site interface and did the same thing, you might see notes across the top here, or you'll see it create a new note, various other things that allow you to create site notes that allow you to change how data behavior works. So you could give a no ADT note or something like that if your site's under construction for a particular time period. There's no analogous thing here. We didn't, you know, that wasn't part of the requirements, and it's not something that we thought would be immediately necessary. But if you guys think about it and say, you know, it might be kind of cool to have notes for whatever reason on a device, that's something we can talk about and add as a feature later. So just like in the sites, you have your site splits listed here. We've just got the one site split because we, or excuse me, device split. I'm going to say site split all the time. Just know that I mean device split. Here, if we're going to do a test and split it, but for now we just have the one. The recorder ID is just whatever you want it to be. I'm going to call it LJ test. This would be usually some sort of serial number or some sort of identifier that uniquely is associated with that device. You can give it a device and make and model, and we have most of the devices out there, but probably not all of them. This is just a database table where we throw this information. So if you have something that's not listed here, tell us and we'll just add it to everybody's with a quick SQL. So let's just say it's a diamond sprite. These are all sort of optional. You don't have to do these, but let me just explain some of them. You can give it an inventory date of when was the last time you actually inventoried that device, when it was last upgraded, when you acquired it. That's often going to be the same date as this, the begin date of the device. The condition, which is one of these three options: it's working or it failed for some reason. How it failed, is it a permanent site and has a cell phone problem, or is it one of these other things? And then that's the fail category, and then the fail reason is all of these things here. So you can, this is part of the database of counters features I'm talking about here. So if you are looking to keep track of every counter state and where they are, this would be the place to do that. And this counts from this device shows you all the counts that were taken by this device. Currently there aren't any because we're just creating this device, but I'll show you a device later that actually has data there. And then down here looks just like the site thing, right? You guys are all familiar with this box if you use the Jackalope site interface. Okay, so I hit OK. And then we get back here. I'm just going to go to LJ test. The next version of this will have a button where you can manage your own devices. There's no requirement to bind it to data or anything like that. Let me just go back and we can do site splits like we can do in sites. Device splits like we can do in sites. So let's just go ahead and change something. Let's go from working to failed right here, and we'll just pick some stuff. Modem. Cell modem failure, sure, why not? And we're going to say that change happened today. And you can say modem failed. Modem failed. And hit update, and it's just like the site. Now all of a sudden we've got two site splits. Since I don't have my checkbox, you don't see them there, but you see them here. We have the initial device creation, which was the truth as of until today, And then after that, we have modem failed. And you can do the usual thing of flipping back and forth between the site splits. So working until today, and then after today, not working. Deletions work just like the site, traffic site deletions. Deleting works at the device split level. So if I were to go, so this is always a question, not always, but it happens frequently where people ask, well, what if a site's no longer in service? How do I deal with that? Because there's nowhere in here you can change the end date. Normally what you do is you split the site. Let's pretend we're in the future, and let's say the site or device, and I'm using site and device here interchangeably because it's the same process for both. Let's say we're in July 2019. How you do that is you create a site split for July 2019. And then it doesn't matter. We're going to go back in here. Now we have a site split. Now we have 3 site splits, right? How you end it is by getting to the latest site split and deleting it. So deletions, just like in sites, happen at the site split level or device split level. So now this device only was around from these dates. Does that make sense? So deletes don't delete the entire device, they delete the device split. Just like when you delete a site, it only deletes that site split that you're currently looking at. Let's go ahead and talk about the other side of it, of associating data with these devices. So this happens through the binding mechanism. So let me just real quickly refresh your memory on binding. So the process of binding is taking the data from a file. So you throw a file at the system, and the system is able to read it, and it sees data, and it sees header columns. Then we have a process that actually gives that data context. So we say, okay, this data actually belongs at this site. Each channel in this data gets laid out at the site like this. So channel 1 is the northbound driving lane. Channel 2 is the northbound passing lane. Those decisions. You can also bind to agencies. So you can say, well, this count data actually belongs to this agency. You can bind, collection methods. So this is a continuous piece of data. This is a short-term piece of data. And there's a few other things that you can bind to out there. There's also the ability to bind to a device. One of the things we just saw. This is the file submission doohickey, which gives you the information about how the file runs through the system, and it also gives you binding information. Let's see. Let's talk about how things bind. There's 2 ways that things bind in the system. The first way, and the way your data hopefully binds, is through what we call an interpretation module. An interpretation module is a piece of code that we've created that has your rules embedded in it. So you might say, I'm going to look at the header for this particular file. This is a diamond file. So you can see all the diamond header information in this file right here. So, like, for example, the site here, actually I don't know where the site is in here. Probably Bill knows, but that's okay. I don't know, maybe that OLAF 135 is the site. I'm not sure where the site is. But anyway, the point is there's something in this file right here that tells us what site this data belongs to. And there's something in here, in fact, in the diachan, I can't move my mouse to show you, but the diachan info 0, diachan info 1, that tells us, oh, that's probably where the site is. But anyway, that tells us where the how the channels map to the lanes, and there's other information. But you can also see right above the diachan info 0, there's counter serial number. This is actually a field in Diamond files that allow you to put the counter serial number in it. And then when the file comes to us, we can just read that, and we can bind this data to that device. Assuming, so if you're looking at the counter serial number, there's 23964, and then there's 2, 4, 3, 5, 6, I guess representing 2 counters or something like that. Oh, but anyway, the point is that information gives us enough information to bind to a device automatically. So no manual intervention is required here. You throw the data into the system sees, oh, this belongs to that device, it binds to that device, and if you were to go look at that device, which we'll do right now, we'll go look at that 53964 device. If we go look at that device, you'll see the data there. So 53964. Let's link. 53964. Okay, there's that device. So if we go to this device, it just has one side split, and then here's a bunch of data. Looks like this data was bound as continuous data. Yes, so there's a whole bunch of continuous counts, and then there's one count right there. When you get to this level, you can click on the count and see the data and the notes associated with that. And of course, from here, you can also purge. If you create a new purge note, you could purge that data, things like that. I'm not going to go over the product there. You've probably seen it before. But so that's what you could do is you can click and view the data, and you can see the individual counts. So the best way to bind this is through the interpretation module, where you don't have to think about it. The serial number is in the device itself, just run it through the system, and it's bound. So each of these, May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd, those are these here, May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd. The other way that you bind data is through binding rules, right? And you can create, there's Taco Bell. You can create binding rules by clicking this down arrow, which it's green, so this means it bound successfully, but let's pretend it didn't. Or it bound successfully, but it didn't bind the device. You can click the rebind data, and yes, I'll unpurge your data, I promise, guys. And you get to this binding screen, which probably a lot of you have experienced before. It's where you can go and put the site and all that other fun stuff. For those people on 103, you will also see a column that looks like this, that has a device. And so each channel can potentially be mapped to a different device because 2 channels might be one device, the other 2 channels might be another device, depending on how it all comes through. And so you can just, it's an autocomplete thing, just like other stuff. And you can go through and enter the devices here, hit create. You'd have to enter in all the other stuff, the site stuff. And then it would create a binding rule, and then once you hit the rebind, or once you hit the refresh thingy, it would rebind this data, and then you would see this channel's data associated with 2030. It's cool the way it is now, but it could even be cooler. And we acknowledge that, and we'd like your feedback on what you think that might be. Or, just think about it for a while and send us emails, or even do it in the forum, our Jackalope forum, which is also a great way of sharing ideas as well. We have available to you this recorder ID field, and this recorder ID field in the MEC goes against the database we're just looking at, the counter database we're just looking at. There is QC in the MEC when you use this field that is not there if you don't use this field. Primarily, the QC that does not allow you to use the same counter for multiple counts that overlap in time. So if for some reason, this counts site blah, 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 begin date 11/27/2018, if you had a different site down below that also overlapped this date range in any way, you would get a QC error in this interface that alerted you to that fact.